Welcome to the program. My name is Catherine Mwangi, and this is What's Your Story? Thank you so much for making the time to tune in. We are at a Moroccan salon, I've just gotten to know that now, in Rabat. No, just kidding, we're not in Rabat. Today we are honored to be sharing the story of the Moroccan ambassador to Kenya, His Excellency Honorable Mokhtar Ghambou. Welcome to the program.
Asante sana, and thank you very much for giving me the chance and the opportunity unique opportunity indeed, to share my story with the lovely people of Kenya.
Yes, and thank you for inviting us to your home. It's beautiful.
Karibu.
You said this is called a Moroccan salon.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Which is a mix of different cultures over many, many centuries. When you talk about the wood, when you talk about architecture, that's actually one of the most fascinating things you find in Morocco if you go as a tourist. It's not just like the landscape, desert, beaches, and so mountains, but
yes.
It's also the architecture and the design.
Yes.
And this has actually a long story because it's really the fusion of many, many civilizations. You know that Morocco is geostrategically open to the Mediterranean and the Atlantic and also to the east. So many actually, if you go to Morocco, you'll find some sort of a design. Usually we tend to say that part of it is also Moorish. Moorish means those refugees, both Muslims and Jews, who were expulsed from Spain to Morocco in the 15th century.
And there's a lot of, like you said, design. It's beautiful. Like there's all of this going on here. So what happens at a salon specifically?
Salon is when you receive your loved ones,
okay.
and when you receive your guests, and that's to receive them like at home, is to receive them at home that reflects your identity, and the salon reflects the Moroccan identity.
I see.
Yeah.
Wow, proud to be a Moroccan.
Anytime.
Anytime. So how long have you served your country in Kenya? How many years?
This is actually my 5th year.
Oh.
So I completed my 4th year in November 2020, and now I'm in the 5th year.
Wow.
Yeah.
Amazing. And your journey to diplomacy, to where we are now?
Well, it's a long journey.
Yes.
First of all, as I always say, I did not expect it. And sometimes when you don't expect things, you perform better when you don't expect things to happen to you. So I had the trust and of His Majesty King Mohammed VI in 2016, and I was appointed ambassador to the Republic of Kenya and also to the Republic of Burundi, in addition to my status as the permanent representative of the Kingdom of Morocco to UNEP and UN Habitat.
Wow, those are many jobs.
Well,
but there's a story behind it. Your journey doesn't start at diplomacy. You are a lecturer, former lecturer at is it Yale?
Yes, Yale University.
And you're also a career politician in Morocco.
Yes, a member of parliament.
You served there as a member of parliament, and many other roles along the way. But let's start with your life as an academician. What led to those steps? You taking those steps to just want to teach people, and what were you teaching?
Yeah, well, it's a long story, as I said. My story, in fact, sometimes when we talk about stories, in a kind of environment, and that environment for me is very mixed, very multiple, very plural. So my story overlaps with at least 4 countries.
Oh.
Morocco, where I was born and raised, and then France, where I did my master's, and then the US, where I continued when I did my PhD, and then went to Yale as a professor, and then to Kenya, of course, as a diplomat. So the beauty about the story is that whenever you talk about one, you automatically actually interrogate the other. So it's a deep reflection. And academia, what is great about academia is that this comprehensive view and approach to things, that academia, that there are no limits. Diplomacy can be part of academia, and politics can be part of academia. Academia is basically the knowledge that without it, we cannot, even some people say this is just academic, meaning there is no action. But without academia, without an academic spirit, academic research, the action is always going to be limited, sometimes even faulty.
So do you feel that your background in academia has made you a better politician then and a better diplomat now?
I had to really use my background, and the background, everybody has a background. I mean, academia is, as I said, very flexible. So when I did politics, I tried to find linkages. It's all, the secret here is to make connections with whatever your background and the fields you're supposed to serve. So, but academia for most Africans, including myself, is not just knowledge. It's not just sort of the classical routine ways of learning, but it's really also discovering oneself. Mm-hmm. I mean, I would tell you that without academia, I would have missed so many important things regarding identity, for example, in African countries. And my field happens to be humanities. And in humanities, I learned how to navigate in politics. And because in Morocco, as a member of the parliament, I also had this national task of representing the Moroccan parliament at the Council of Europe. And some of the issues we were talking, I don't know whether by coincidence or because they were fashionable, is migration and refugees, and I happen to, or diaspora, and I happen to actually to be teaching exactly the same topics. My field is called post-coloniality, so it is a field that is really very popular, especially in the US and now also in Europe. And it is a field that you cannot just sort of approach with detachment, but it's a part of you. Post-colonial identity this is what Africa is living now. And what it means, and sometimes I would even say or tell my friends that I discovered my Moroccan identity while I was doing research at Yale libraries or Columbia or all these universities in the US. And when you tell your story. In fact, we forget that sometimes our stories are made successful because of the environment. And when I went to the US after France in the 1990s, that was actually when I just found this fascinating and compelling academic environment, which was about postmodernity and post-coloniality. Mm-hmm. And all of a sudden, like, it's really a gift from heaven to see that once there, all of a sudden your identity is recognized, which means that there is space for you. If you talk before the emergence of this field, it emerged actually basically around the 1980s. Before this field, I studied in France and I did not feel it because I compare a lot my studies in France and the US. Mm-hmm. And in France, it would be just like you are a scholar, you're trying to prepare a career of a scholar, which means that part of yourself is repressed and you are not supposed to talk about it. But in the US, it was completely different. Why? American society is fascinating in the sense that you do not just have knowledge, you do not just have books and professors, but you have actually the public, and sometimes it's the students who act it out. So the ideal American classroom is a mix of Asian Americans, African Americans, Africans, and many, many others. So that's really the environment, as I said, that really help you to have a deep reflection about so many central issues, identity, history, the past, colonialism, post-colonialism, and so many other issues.
So you did that for how many years?
I did that for up to 10 years.
Oh, wow.
Yes.
That's amazing.
Then I moved back to Morocco, which was an interesting shift. I mean, in Morocco, I took things for granted, but when you are at a distance, when you're objective, then you have actually a very neutral and objective analysis of your own country, of your own self. So I went back, but I went back to actually, my purpose going back is to found a diaspora university, which was a very successful project. We did it in Rabat in 2011. And then so many things happened. Just when I say that in America there was post-coloniality and post-modernity, in Morocco there was the new constitution, the so-called Arab Spring, and His Majesty King Mohammed VI made really a breakthrough in terms of reforms, and those reforms all of a sudden seem to fit anybody like me, which is like welcoming home, which is looking for new faces. And I remember before, I mean, when I was first approached to participate in the elections as an MP, I took that as a joke. Said, "How come that I've been absent? Or I had been absent for about 20 years, and here people asking me to just give it a chance and run for the elections." Then I rediscovered that our African societies are really deeply attached to this new fascinating community that is appearing now, which is called the diaspora.
Yes.
So they voted for me, and I became actually a parliamentarian, to my surprise. So that actually moved me away a little bit from academia.
Yes.
But then the challenge was, you know, to change the image of politics itself. And I believe that what I loved about that particular experience in the beginning, I used to say, actually, politics is not a job, is not something that would give you a name or a career. In many countries in Africa in particular, we still go to politics to actually make a name, which is completely wrong in many cases, because after you make a name, after you become successful, then you can become a politician, in the sense that you have an experience, especially if it's international, that you could share with the public. Yeah.
So you talk about finding your identity as a Moroccan when you were a professor at Yale.
Yeah.
So you didn't have that before, but being at Yale gave you this discovery, and you knew what, who you are, and what maybe your ideals are. So paint for me what this identity picture looks like. What was this discovery like?
So what I said is that when I went to France, it was rather a space where you don't talk much about yourself, because there is a complicity, what I call colonial complicity. France was one of the occupying countries of Morocco, so was Spain. And so there was some sort of evasion from that question. There was some complicity. It's better not to bring it up. And still the question is, should we forget the atrocities of the past, or should we remember? So in France, people hardly ask you where you come from. It seems as if they know who you are.
Okay.
And sometimes you are even classified before you can talk about yourself. And this is actually one of the dilemmas of African stories, is that before you tell your story is already told.
There's a narrative.
By anthropologists, by writers, by specialists, even by philosophers. They will tell you what an African is before you have the chance as an African to talk about yourself.
Yeah.
Right? But the question I ask is, what do we make of it? You know, France knows everything about Morocco. So many things. Translations, because French is the first foreign language in Morocco.
Right.
But what is the use of it for me? So I used to ask a question. Americans, of course, sometimes they don't know where you are from, but at least the most important thing is that they give you a chance to explain who you are. So I'd rather have somebody giving me a chance to explain who I am than somebody who already knows who I am by tradition, which is what we call the stereotype.
Right.
What kills now the relationship between East and West is exactly that, the stereotype, stereotypical thinking. So this is about time to actually really explode them and let people express themselves. And this is again what my field, post-coloniality, is doing. So in America, I discovered the fact that I was both. I was a mixed. I came from a country that has both Berbers and Arabs, right? And then I learned how to really appreciate the kind of legacy that I had, that I did not really think that it was very important. So I was like, because education sometimes, we believe that it just makes expertise and produces expertise, but in fact, education should also form the human being. And if there is something lacking within the psyche of that human being, then the expert is not going far, right? So that's my experience. In America, why identity is important, because I found myself in a crowd which is concerned by identity. I was not the only one.
Yeah.
America, as you know, is the new world. So what do we mean by new world is that everything is in the making. And I loved the fact that American scholars, for some of them that I studied with, would ask a question. What matters is not where you came from, where you are going. It's the idea of the future. And within that future, so we were creating it together.
Right.
That future belongs to everybody, students, professors, scholars, the whole society at large.
Yeah. So you didn't experience any form of racism when you were in America as a lecturer, as a student?
Well, racism is sometimes a global phenomenon. But even in France, I didn't really experience like that stark racism. I mean, sometimes, but racism, I mean, it's of course, when it's open, when it's direct, we can actually report it. But racism is a long story. I mean, when I talk about the stereotypes, it is actually leading to racism, right? And in America, I know the history. I'm not naive to deny. But what makes the American society is first the confession. It's like in a classroom when you are teaching a class about American history and you talk about genocides of Native Americans and so forth, people have this ability to come up and say, yes, our ancestors did that. So they acknowledge it, they admit it. And when you and sometimes in Europe, it's unfortunately it's repressed as a story, which is you might find people really bothered by that, but they don't say it in public. And stories sometimes when it comes to racism, colonialism, all these big issues that Africa has been experiencing, they should be public. They can't be private. Private, we all have our secrets, we all have our frustrations, but things that if we want to deal with, we have to deal with them publicly.
Yeah. So, as a member of parliament in Morocco, your country, what did you bring to the table? How did you transform the lives of the people that you were representing?
I transformed the life. Sometimes, you know, as an MP, it's, you make laws, you participate in making laws rather than serving the people directly. Of course, in Africa, it's still the parliamentarian has a sociological status more than a legal status, more than a lawmaker. As we say, a congressman or woman are lawmakers. In African countries, not just Morocco, there is still a tendency to view the parliamentarian as somebody who's serving his community. Just serving it, but serving it what? Like social services and help out, charity, and so forth. I try to just change that kind of idea. That actually a parliamentarian, don't imagine an MP to be a rich man or rich woman who is there just to give you money and then help, right? We changed that idea about the parliamentarian, that you don't need to have this very close interaction with your MP, but try to force him or her to make laws that are going to change actually the nature of society, and that is going to sort of help with the economic development. So we tried in Morocco, in the Moroccan parliament, that was really a very important era, like after 2011. We really tried to, with, like everybody was agreed, inspired by His Majesty Mohammed VI approach to society, where it's not just concrete projects that are there that would make Morocco really an emerging nation in Africa or in the world, but it's really the importance of the human element. It's the importance of human development. It's trying to create some sort of equality and equity between different parts of Morocco. Some of the parts that were actually in the desert, the mountains, whatever, what I came from used to be seen as the non-productive Morocco, as we call it. But then I see really that there were a lot of projects sort of coming close to within this concept of decentralization, what you call devolution.
Right.
One. Two, we tried to make laws. I was actually one of the MPs who participated in making laws in allowing our diaspora to be an integral part of our citizenship. So, and then the Constitution really backs this, and we just had to implement it, because you might know that we have about almost 7 million Moroccans living abroad, right? And this is actually, this is an amazing capital at all levels, cultural, intellectual, and also, of course, financial.
Yeah.
So we try to make laws to a point like a Moroccan man or woman who come to Morocco would feel that actually by being born abroad, they still have full rights of citizenship. One. Two, I was very active in what I said earlier about the Council of Europe. I was representing Morocco.
Yes.
And that's called parliamentary diplomacy. We are, at that time when I went, just in 2010, we had this special status with the Council of Europe, as Morocco is the partner for democracy, you know, because this is our biggest investment, is the democratic values, the cultural values, gender, many other laws regarding the disfavored people in society. So we were privileged. We were actually the only African country who had that status of partner for democracy. So we're trying to really sort of make laws that would really increase, or that would really reinforce that kind of relationship between European institutions and the institutions of Europe. Knowing also that actually where the privileges lie of the EU. As you know, Morocco is very close to Europe, so we try to really use our background in all ways. And the Parliament at that time was something that I would really that helped me sort of get into into deep debates and dialogues with my European counterparts.
Right. So you
Yeah.
were an MP for how many years?
I was an MP for 5 years.
Oh, wow. So 10 years professor, 5 years MP.
Yeah,
And the next step was the diplomacy.
absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we shall come into that story in a few minutes, right after this commercial break. Welcome back from the break. This is What's Your Story? So far enchanted by the life and times of the Moroccan ambassador to Kenya, His Excellency Honorable Mokhtar Ghambou. And so we have seen your path all along, academia, politician, and now diplomacy. But before we get to your appointment, what was your childhood like?
I was born in a very small village. It's not even a village, it's the countryside. When I look back, I said, I'm happy that actually that happened that way. At that time, I had this complex of coming from the countryside. I mean, it's all over Africa. When you come to the city, space becomes some sort of capital. This is the way you impress people. When you tell them I come from Nairobi, it's not when you tell them I come from Naivasha, or this is the same thing in all over Africa. Even if in America later you find that the countryside, what they call the suburbs, is much more privileged than the city. So,
Okay.
and then it's school that drove me from one place to another. From a countryside, I was, and then I was given some sort of a scholarship for primary school, and then I went to a city, and then from that city to another bigger city, and then I got the government scholarship from Morocco to go to France. But the story, when I think about my education myself, because education was not really sort of a very common thing at a certain point. Why was it? Is it necessary? This was actually in the 1950s. Like in Africa, the priority was to fight the colonizer and decolonize the country. After that, we started to create the modern state.
Yeah.
So I came within that historical context of creating the modern state, was post-colonial issues that we had to deal with.
Yeah.
I went to school, but still where I came from, like actually the majority of the people did not go to school. Or sometimes you go to primary school and then they stop. Why all of a sudden there is this phenomenon that emerged in northern Morocco, which is called migration. So most of my family, the fashion or the fashionable thing at that time is to be an immigrant. That was the dream. Not to be anything else. So my father happened to be one of those migrants in Germany.
Oh.
And when I was born, because he had these traumatic stories, my father did not have a formal education in German or in French or anything. Even his Arabic was not that strong. So when he thought that he actually went through very traumatic experiences where he said in his own terms that he was driven like an animal to the factory, meaning because you don't know how to read, so they will talk to you like sign language, like you are an animal. So that trauma said, whoever is going to be born in my children, I'm the one before last, is going to be sent to school to actually some sort of revenge over this modern system through school.
Yes.
That's exactly what drove me to school.
Yes.
And I remember that my parents invested in me so much, even if they did never know exactly what it means to get a degree or secondary degree, for secondary education, a degree or so. And then my father passed away, and then my mother insisted, even if she doesn't know exactly what education meant, she says you have to finish education. Of course, education is never finished; it's never limited. But in her top, I mean, this kind of really this passion of replacing. So in that context, what I was doing, my father passed away. He was in Germany. So my mother saw in me somebody renewing this adventure of the migrant, but a migrant who can go beyond that migration.
Yes.
So this is after I finish, and then of course and also in Morocco itself, this is something very interesting. When I look back at my life, I see why I chose. Many people ask me, why did you choose English studies instead of French or Arabic? At that time, like even the term Berber was not really recognized as an identity. You know, it was still like something that was in the coming, but it was not the time. So it seems as if I wanted a neutral territory where I could discover for myself something new, to avoid the complicity of both French and Arabic, even if I spoke both. So, and then English all of a sudden opened me and also gave me a status when I went to France, in earlier question about racism. When they know I came from Morocco, of course, but what do you study? I'm studying American studies or English studies. Then all of a sudden, my French students, my French friends,
Yeah.
then actually they stop.
Respect.
Yeah, respect in the sense because I am doing something where that complicity is not the question. Okay, and from there, and so this is my childhood, as I told you. But after I went to France, and then when I went to America, now people ask me then, back then when I went to the US, what did you get from it? You know, they imagine you to be an engineer. Or
Yeah.
I didn't do that. I didn't go for sciences or for technical things. I said, you know, what I learned from America, I said the word in French, I was able to overcome the colonial complex.
Ooh.
In French, we call it décomplexé. Like that complex was all the time there. It's when in America, all of a sudden, I thought, finally, there is no difference in the world, whether you come from Africa or from Asia. You're still a human being, and you can contribute, and you have a voice.
I love it. I love it. Wow. So your inspiration to get into academics came from your father,
Yeah.
who didn't manage to jump that hurdle. So
Yeah.
you decided this is going to be my cross to carry, and it was a beautiful one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So my father, and then when I went to Europe, so even my families, I have so many relatives in Europe, of course, Germany, France. You know, this is again like many Kenyans in England. You know, we cannot very easily
Yeah.
remove that link with the former empire.
Yeah.
So, but what was new is the fact that my family really adopted me, like really loved me in the fact that I was doing something different. That I came, instead of going to a factory, I went to school. And what that means is that my peers were European, so they were very proud because there are certain spaces in Europe that were forbidden. Not forbidden like legally, but forbidden for where they intimidate the migrant community. So when you go to schools and I went to these big schools in Paris, they finally say, wow, I mean, we can actually share this space with the Europeans. So that's the difference. And my mother too, after that, she was so proud, not this usual pride, because sometimes there is usual pride about geography. Africans sometimes they say, what do you do? They will answer you, I live in England. That's an answer, instead of telling you, I am a doctor, I am this, because that was some sort of a pride. So now I even tell Moroccans, stop that kind of stereotype that you live in London or in Paris. Come to Kenya, you have a chance maybe to make more money in 5 years that you wouldn't make in 30 years in Europe. But you still want this kind of that's kind of flattering answer. I live in Europe, meaning I live in civilization, instead of going and seeking adventures elsewhere.
Understood. I think it's an African problem. We like to just focus on the fantasy.
Yeah.
But anyway, so your appointment came through the king to be a diplomat. So tell us about it.
Through His Majesty King Mohammed VI. Yes, and actually my title in Morocco is Ambassadeur de Sa Majesté, the ambassador of His Majesty.
Wow.
So, and then, of course, when you have that kind of trust, that kind of confidence, you try to honor that status. It's not an easy status. It's something that is really sort of inspire you and inspire you to really sort of serve your country with passion. What also helped me really sort of love my work is the lovely people of Kenya. Nairobi is considered for many ambassadors. I didn't know this because I'm not a career diplomat. Is one of the privileged places for all Moroccan ambassadors.
Okay.
So I love it. Of course, they love it for the climate, love it for the weather, but I love it really for the vibrant Kenyan people, the dynamic society. That recalls, sometimes I find my home here in Kenya like a way of understanding Morocco through Kenya, in the sense that you have a liberal culture, you have a youth, you have dynamism, you have all the elements that would make an ambassador love to be in Nairobi. Two, what makes my cause even stronger is the fact that I'm in a country that is a regional leader in East Africa, just as Morocco is a regional leader in North Africa. So my mission, and this is a continuous mission of course, is to make these two regional leaders meet and boost their cooperation. Why? Because this is the only way. If you put two leaders together, you bring them together, they are going to strengthen the societies, not just in Morocco and Kenya, but also they will set an example, an inspiring example for the whole African continent.
Yes. And I see that our relationship dates back many years from this photograph with Kenya's first president. So Kenya and Morocco's relationship is not it's not young.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes.
So could you tell us a bit about this picture?
Jomo Kenyatta, the founder of Kenya, late Jomo Kenyatta, and the founder of modern Morocco, the late King Hassan II, had this historical friendship. Not just, and that friendship was not just was not just private.
Yeah.
But it's a friendship that produced what we call now the African Union. We were working together. We got our independence in 1955. You got yours in 1963. The late Jomo Kenyatta would actually write letters to Hassan II asking him to lobby, because we got our independence before yours, to lobby on behalf of Kenya to get its independence, to lobby at the UN.
Wow.
And after you got independence, you continued that kind of friendship. And of course you heard about they were also the inspiration for the Casablanca Club, which was attended by the founders of African nations like Nkrumah, Keita from Mali, Nkrumah, and many others, Jamal Abdel Nasser from Egypt. So it was in the early 1960s that the idea of creating the organization of African Union was born. That was really sort of a breakthrough in history. So, and whenever I'm asked about the relationship between Kenya and Morocco, I refer to these two examples, Ibn Battuta as a cultural one, and the friendship between these two founders as the second one. So and so it was when I arrived here, and of course I knew this history before coming here. I said one of my first tasks is to revive this historical relations and then extend it in different fields. Diplomacy, of course, it's in economic, social, cultural, academic, and so forth.
Right.
So it is our duty, it is our task, both Kenyans and Moroccans, to really revive or get a lesson from these two leaders and how they are going to really help us boost our relations in the future.
What challenges do you face as a diplomat now?
Well, when I face challenges, it's good, because the problem is when you don't have challenges.
That's a very diplomatic, intellectual answer right there.
No, I will be very honest. Yeah. Why I'm honest? Because I said I love Kenya, I love the Kenyan people, and when you love people, you have to be honest with them, and at the risk of not being diplomatic, because usually what we mean by the term diplomatic is evasive. You know, you evade questions instead of answering them. There is a huge potential.
Okay.
Economic, social, academic, cultural, and so forth. You know, we have the history at least. That would make like Kenya and Morocco like some of the best partners, African partners in Africa, right? The one thing that is important is to remember, sometimes when I ask my Kenyan friends, how come that Kenya and Morocco, they are not as, in the relations, not as good as we expect them to be. They tell me one thing that I try to correct, which is Morocco, Kenya is far from Morocco. Morocco is far from Kenya. Same thing in Morocco. They say, oh, Kenya is far. So we have to look into that kind of distance. This is rather something that we make up, that we sort of let our imagination accept, which I call imaginative geography. And then I'll ask them back, why isn't London far? Or in the case of Senegal or Côte d'Ivoire, why isn't Paris far? So you see, why, when it comes to Europe, everything is near, the distance is not a challenge. When it comes to ourselves, Africans dealing with each other, all of a sudden geography becomes a challenge.
Right.
Think also about the empires, the French and the British empires. They built empires all over the world. There was no means of telecommunication whatsoever. Nonetheless, they believed in a project. For us, it's false, but then they believed in it. They formed an empire. Yes. So you can imagine. You can imagine people in Ghambou or in Kisumu, or all of a sudden these teachers trying to build the British Empire, believing in it, without any means, no telephone, nothing. And then when it comes to us, you know, all the means are there. We can access them very easily, and still we have this distance as an excuse. It's never an excuse. So we have to drop this distance from our imagination.
Right.
2, Morocco and Kenya are different. And I love that. Economically speaking, of course, I'd rather have somebody who are different, because what makes ideal partnership is difference. You grow coffee, but we drink coffee 3 times a day, at least. And we don't grow it. This complementarity saves Moroccan and Kenyan relationship from entering some sort of aggressive competition. You know, what is the challenge now for COMESA, ECOWAS, SADC, and all those? Many countries grow the same thing, and they ended up fighting for markets. It's not the case in Morocco. You need fertilizers. You are an agricultural country. Morocco, as I said, the OCP is the world's largest producer of fertilizers. So here it is. We have a perfect potential of fixing our relationships.
Yeah.
And why? Because we are complementary. But now, since I spoke about honesty, I'm saying I'm going to be honest in the sense that I don't want to be evasive. So there is this obstacle that really prevents us from pushing and boosting our relationship, which is the Sahara question. So you know that the Sahara, and many times before, I really sort of, from my heart, I call upon Kenya and the Kenyan government to support our plan of autonomy for the Sahara and the Moroccan sovereignty. I say this because I'm convinced that there is a deep misunderstanding. Maybe sometimes the question is maybe this linguistic thing, you know. Morocco, as you know, is the first African investor in West Africa and the second African investor at the level of the continent. But in East Africa, there is some sort of lack, and we're trying to fix it. Is it because of language again? Because we divide Africa into Francophone and Anglophone countries. So in Anglophone countries, we still have this challenge of the Sahara because some governments do not understand the real issue. Or maybe we have to do more to explain them what it is, right? So 1. 2, Kenya, what I love about Kenya is the country, whenever I sit with your foreign affairs specialists, Kenya is one of the countries that really defend the territorial integrity of the African countries, and that where there should be no interference in any kind of like in any country. So that applies because Moroccans, when I speak about the Sahara, I'm not speaking about myself as a diplomat really having a cause to defend, but there is a consensus in Morocco between the government, the people, defending the territorial integrity and not allowing this kind of misunderstanding to really sort of mislead people outside when it comes to the Sahara. 3, when I had the chance before to explain, this is a problem of separatism that threatens many countries in Africa. I mean, the Polisario separatists, they are armed, something that we need to know, armed by Algeria. As I said, I have to be honest. And they threaten the stability, not just of Morocco, but of the whole North Africa and the Sahel and so forth, right? And separatism, you know, I did some research about this topic, and there are at least 22 African countries facing the problem of separatism. Especially now. Why? Because sometimes you'll find a tribe somewhere in DRC or in any country. They are made to believe that they have some diamonds underground. All of a sudden, what they say, let us just create our own republic so nobody shares with us. They forgot history. They forgot how we became independent. We forgot all these things as if all of a sudden the creation of a state comes back to some sort of material calculation, which is completely wrong. So Kenya is a major country, as I said before, and now it's a non-permanent member at the UN Security Council. So this issue of the Sahara, what we're telling our friends is that it's taken care of by the UN, right? And the recent resolutions over the past 4 years use a language that is really the language taken from our proposal for the autonomy of the Sahara, which is practical, pragmatic, and peaceful. So we should call for peaceful solution to the issue of the Moroccan Sahara. Despite this challenge, I'm investing on what I call devolution diplomacy, which is taking local governments from Kenya and having them sign MOUs of partnership with regions in Morocco. We have 12 regions. We started with the first one, which is Mombasa, with Tangiers, And it's an amazing actually partnership. It's going to work. Why? Because within the context of the Big Four, and for us within the context of the South-South cooperation,
Okay.
your companies from Kenya would go to Tangiers, process their goods, and export them to Europe without paying tax, because we don't pay tax.
Yes.
We're the privileged partner of the EU.
Yeah.
So you can imagine all companies, instead of, because this is His Excellency the President said this too, that sometimes we would just sort of export raw material. It's better to process it in Africa, which is Morocco, and then export it through trucks to the European Union countries. And you'll see how it will benefit. And also we are bringing also the OCP that I told you about to Kenya, to see how we can actually sort of participate in reinforcing agriculture, maximizing on the output and so forth.
Yeah.
And there is also other agencies like Marchika, as I said before, they are trying to deal with the coast from Mombasa to Kilifi all the way to Lamu, even in coordination with the UN Habitat. And there is another partnership that is going to be signed, I think, either at the end of this month or in the beginning of September, between Kisumu County and the county of and the region of Marrakesh.
Wow.
So this is devolution diplomacy, but this devolution means what? Means that sometimes local governments in both countries do not just have to wait from the central governments to really extend what is to be extended projects, but they can act as an inspiring force for the central government itself to redefine the process of bilateral diplomatic relationship.
I haven't heard of devolution diplomacy before. It's the first I'm hearing of it from you.
Yeah, this is academics trying to coin
No, but
terms wherever they are.
I think it's brilliant. It's brilliant that you have decentralized this bilateral relations that we have into now the counties. So county here, county in Morocco, and it ends up, distilling to the people, to the communities.
Yeah, absolutely. It's people to people.
Yes.
And diplomacy is not just about official things. Diplomacy is about so many things. Of course, if you ask a non-career diplomat to give you a definition of diplomacy, he will never give you one, because it's never precise, it's broad. And anything that can help, anything that can help and inspire the two countries or more to be in a good relationship is welcome. That's what diplomacy is about. And believe me, so many of your Kenyan people go to Morocco because this is also something visual, and they come back. And I don't even need to make a case for Morocco. Journalists went to the Sahara that I talked about, and when they came, they were shocked, because in the imagination, or they heard that there was war, there was bullets, and finally they even found tomatoes being grown in the Sahara. Right, and they found that actually there's no problem. That people are just ordinary, like in the south, what we call south provinces in the Sahara, like the north where I came from, is exactly the same.
Wow, so that's a lot going on already. You've
Yes,
done
absolutely.
a lot in 5 years, a lot.
And I hope also that your country would consider opening an embassy as soon as possible, because it's impossible sometimes to work with two countries. We have an embassy here, not one, but the oldest embassy in East Africa. So we're proud of it, and we have been here more than 40 years in Nairobi. So we expect actually Kenya to really sort of open an embassy in Rabat, and you'll see again how that would generate more reasons for working together.
That's amazing. Where do you like to go in Kenya? Which places are your favorite?
Naivasha, Kisumu, I go to the coast, I go to Garissa, I go to these places because we did not, our mission is not to just stay in the capital and meet our colleagues, knowing that Nairobi had fascinating ambassadors and permanent representatives. But if you don't know the people, if you don't know the culture, if you don't know the rituals, you miss so many things, because diplomacy is about peoples too. It's not just about central governments and official, what we call the not verbal, that kind of protocol, everything is respected. It's about day-to-day contacts with the people.
I see.
Yeah.
That sounded like someone who maybe is going to be running for presidency, or what do you run? An office higher than the MP? Sometime in the future?
I don't know. The future is there. I mean, whenever I am called to serve my country, I will be serving my country. And it's, believe me, when you serve your country, it's a noble mission. I mean, I didn't think about it before, because you just look at yourself as one of the ordinary citizens. But when you're really in the middle of something, you feel that whatever you accomplish is whatever you accomplish for the people.
Yeah.
It's really part of yourself. So stories, again, they are not just private and individual, but they are collective. You know, just like the ancient times.
Yeah.
And those stories really give us values. In the absence of institutions, if you think about stories, collective, serving, why this hero in the Odyssey or in the Iliad? Why do I identify with the hero? Because he's serving as one of us, serving one of our causes, serving one of our, whether it's religious or cultural or political or diplomatic, but there's a hero that you attach yourself to, which means that you don't want to be just in pure privacy, but you want to be connected to a world. And that world can be a nation, can be a country, can be so many things. And my story, when I said overlaps with 4 countries, that's exactly what it is. But of course, my story is also the story of my country because I represent it here.
Yes.
A country that is a nation, I usually define, not a country carved out of colonial map, but a country that is at least 14th centuries old. Yeah.
That's a deep relationship. And all I can say is wish you all the best as you try to bring us closer together. So, of course, you've had incredible achievements the last 5 years since you came. And we can only go better, go further. And let's see where the journey leads you.
Wherever I go, whatever I do, Kenya has made a great difference in my life, really. This is actually, Kenya gave me, I knew Kenya before through your famous intellectual, Ngugi wa Thiong'o, because he's the one who taught me how to read these European narratives about us, you know, including out of Africa, because I remember very well in his classroom. So I was very inspired. When I saw Ngugi, I said, my goodness, I didn't look at what was written, at those stories written about us before, but sometimes you need to have the tools. And I really want, it's not just should be limited to the classroom, but I want everybody to know how to read the Western narrative. Why? Because that would really sort of freeze you from the colonial complex, as Ngugi calls it. So that was my first contact with Kenya, and then of course there was Ali Mazrui, and now, but I saw with my own eyes the amazing energy of the Kenyan people and the Kenyan culture. It is something that would mark you forever.
Yeah, wow, I'm happy to hear that. And Your Excellency, thank you very much for sharing your story with us today. It is a long one, a really long one, but that's all the time we could afford today, and I believe that at least we have glimpses, footprints of your life, you know, from your education to your politics, now diplomat, and just your passion in wanting to see our 2 countries do better, become better is commendable. Yeah, so thank you for sharing that.
You are very welcome. Yeah.
And to you watching, thank you so very much for tuning in today. The show goes right up on YouTube after this, and remember we have a repeat every Wednesday at 7 in the morning. So from Rabat, here in Nairobi, we say kwaheri.